Native American flute. Anyway, guys, so today I'm going to talk about heavy metals. Not this type of heavy metal, but heavy metals that basically poison you, right? So heavy metals are bad if you consume them. And what happens is that you're going to fall off your chair when I tell you this. So we should be cautious about what we consume, but we can only be so cautious, right? Because people will try to avoid heavy metal, like especially like they'll say like, products from like India, right? Like Ayurvedic medicine, right? Has a lot of heavy metals in it. So that what are heavy metals? Heavy metals are basically, things like, like arsenic, cadmium, you know what I mean? Things like that. Or, lead, right? Things like that are in there. So what'll happen is that if you consume it in large amounts, you'll die. So it'll basically, right? It'll do various organ damage, let's put it that way. You can research that on your own. So Americans, we're sort of cautious about stuff, especially from places like India, because it's not regulated, right? Heavy metals comes in, Ayurvedic medicine. So you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know where it's, right? So that's one source. But most people here, I don't think we're consuming a lot of stuff, straight from India. But what we do consume is teas, Chinese teas, okay? So we got to be wary about Chinese teas because these things can have heavy metal. So what you can do is that you can, look to see what the heavy metal content is. I'm going to explain it to you right now. So the whole thing here is that, and, I know you're going to hate this, but heavy metals are unavoidable. So all plants, right? If you're eating, American grown, like leafy vegetables, potatoes, right? Kind of like that, like any kind of earthy vegetables, right? They all have a portion of heavy metal in there because heavy metals are in the soil. That's the natural part of living. That's the natural part of even 10,000 years ago, right? So that's the natural part of living is that soils, all soil, anywhere, right, contain all kinds of minerals. So when you have all kinds of minerals, this includes stuff like, iron, cadmium, arsenic. These are things that are in the soil. So what happens is that as plants are growing, what do plants do? They take, nutrients from the soil, right? So they're going to take that into the soil. So, for example, strawberries have heavy metals in them, right? You probably didn't know that, right? So most of the things you already eat has heavy metals in them. But there's a caveat here. So, caveat is that they're below a detectable range, so it's safe for human consumption. So this should freak you out because you're eating poison, but when you're eating it 1 part per million, it doesn't really matter, right? And this is what humanity has been doing since the beginning of time, right? Everybody's animals, humans, everybody's eating heavy metals, but it's like 1 part in a million. So 1 part in a million means it's something similar to those 5-gallon jugs of water. For water dispensers, you know what I mean? The 5-gallon. So if you take about 3 of those and you put it together, right? And then you put 1 drop of poison in there, well, it gets diluted. That's about roughly 1 part in a million, which is what I, researched. Or it would be something like, a bathtub. You fill a bathtub full of water and then you put in several drops. I think it's something like 10 drops or 10 to 15 drops of, whatever it is. So think about that rate of dilution. In a whole bathtub of water, you take poison and then you put 15 drops in there, right? Is it going to kill you? Probably not. That is 1 part in a million. Some measure similar to that, right? So you're already eating poison, but the government will say, well, if it's below a detectable range, it's okay. So something like 1 part in a million, it's way below, they can detect, I think, 1 part in a million, but if it's below that, it's consumed, it's basically, okay to, eat. So something like strawberry has lead in it, but I think it's below the 1 part per million. So it's consumed, it's deemed safe to eat. So you're already consuming heavy metals from strawberries, from potatoes, basically all vegetables, leafy vegetables, right? All these things have all these, impurities as well as purities. But like I said, the ratio of it is very low. However, so you don't have to worry about that. I don't want you, because all I eat is vegetables. I'm a vegetarian, so you don't have to worry about that. I eat, all these things that I told you. So we can't. Then I couldn't eat anything. I would starve to death because I don't eat meat. So that's okay because it's below, right? Like I said, it's below the safety, the allowed margin. So it's safe to eat. However, something like Chinese teas, you don't know where this is coming from. Chinese teas are basically, known for to contain more heavy metals because this is coming from somewhere that's not regulated. It can come from some place like, for example, some kind of Chinese forest where they're dumping chemicals, right? Industry, this is where a lot of this comes from this. So there's two sources. One is these heavy metals are naturally occurring because it's like, from high school periodic table, right? You have a periodic table. All those elements are naturally occurring, right? Plus minerals and plus things like that. That's one thing. Apart from that, what you have is, industrialization, factory waste. So that puts, extra stuff in there. That's what's dangerous because that will basically dump waste into the soil and the plants don't know the difference. The plants will pick it up as if it was natural. So if a plant picks that up, right, what will happen is that the contents of these heavy metals are going to be much higher. So in China, like if, for example, if you use a lot of pesticides use, heavy metals. I don't know which ones, but, it's bad chemicals, right? So the plants will absorb that and then you're eating it. So therefore, the heavy metal contents in your body will now increase. Like things like mercury even, right? So something like a Chinese tea, everything on Amazon is basically, a lot of it is from China, a lot of it's from India. So buy American sourced tea that is organic. So always look at the tea and then say, where is this from? Because Amazon will say, where is it from? If it's from China, I've bought Chinese tea before. You can't tell the difference, but, from what I've given you, the information I've given you, just to be on the safe side, right? So it's not regulated. And U.S. sources report that Chinese teas have, like 200, 300% of the heavy metals that are, based on like, American teas. So you're taking a gamble with teas. So all teas have some kind of heavy metal. Like I said, they all do. But Chinese teas have more. So what you can do is you can look for organic alternatives that are, made here. Like, for example, I would suggest buying loose tea. So this is chamomile. Some people pronounce it chamomile. I think chamomile is like an old school, old English pronunciation. Like Lord of the Rings kind of, But I like to pronounce it chamomile. So chamomile tea, right? This is good. So this is loose tea. So loose teas are better than something like this, packaging this. And then these are like already made tea bags, right? I don't know for sure if this contains heavy metal or not. But like I said, Chinese sourced teas have more heavy metal. So this is something like this. You can buy loose tea from places like, United States, locally grown, organic, certified. We have control over this because they test it, right? And again, this has heavy metal in it, but it's far below the threshold where, it's deemed safe. It's far below the threshold, so it's deemed safe. So, few things that we discussed here, right? That you're consuming heavy metals no matter what, but it's below the threshold. Teas have a high content of heavy metal, especially if they're imported, because we can't test them if they're from China or something like that, right? Or people may not have the resources here to test them. A lot of this stuff comes straight from China on Amazon. Remember that. So that's the thing, is that to just watch out for. Nothing to freak out over, I think. That, oh my God, I'm consuming heavy metals. Well, you've been doing that, your parents and your grandparents, and since the, Adam and Eve, since humanity, everybody's been consuming it. But we want to make sure that they're, below a safe level. That's all. So industrialization, waste from industrialization, right? What do? They just dump it in the river. Well, that'll cause this. So if these plants are being harvested right? If they're being harvested right next to the river where there's like, industrialization plant is dumping, crap into the soil, this is the plant will pick it up and then now you're eating it. Now you got it, right? For example, like seafood will have mercury, right? So if you're eating fish, fish has always higher levels of mercury. So sometimes I remember when I used to live in the Bay Area, there was a pond over there. You guys probably know it if you're from the Bay Area, right around Santa Teresa. It's like a lake where people go fishing, but the mercury content is so high that they say that people just catch them and then they just release it, right? Release it back in the pond. They don't eat it, so it's just to catch it. So anyway, that's it. So be especially careful of stuff on Amazon from places like India, right? Because a lot of white people here, right, they'll basically jump on anything that's like, Eastern culture because, you feel that, you're missing out on something. Oh my God, Ayurvedic medicine, I'm Indian. I don't even do yoga. I'll talk about that some other time because yoga is not designed as just an exercise. It's designed as a spiritual practice to transform your body to become your own God. I wrote a college paper on this. So you don't want to release that kundalini, that coiled serpent, because you're not ready for that. So this is similar to that in the sense that, if you're buying herbs from the Himalayan mountains, well, you don't know there could be a high concentration of heavy metal there, right? Heavy metal poisoning is a big deal. Okay? All right. So you should just be careful, make sure that you get your sources properly, probably locally, organically grown that's been tested, all right, for these heavy metals and then deemed that it's, under it's safe to consume or under a certain threshold.